Either your daughter finds her own place by next week, or I'm filing for divorce. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding as those words cut through the silence of our house. My stepfather Stan had just given my mother an ultimatum: choose him, or choose me. What he didn't know was that I'd been documenting his secrets for months, and I was about to use every single piece of evidence to destroy the life he'd built on lies. This is the story of how I took down the man who tried to erase me from my own family. Before we dive into the story, I have a quick favor to ask. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far our stories reach. And if this is your first time here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single twist in our revenge stories. We drop new videos every single day. Now back to the story. My name is Gloria, and I'm 23 years old. Most people would describe me as quiet, maybe even timid. But sometimes, quiet people are the ones you should fear most, because we're always watching, always listening, always remembering. Stan entered our lives when I was 15 years old. My biological father Ray had left the year before, at least that's what I was told. Stan was charming, successful, and seemed to worship my mother. He brought flowers every Friday, remembered her favorite wine, and promised to be the father I'd supposedly lost. But from the very beginning, something felt off. I remember my 16th birthday party. Mom had spent weeks planning it. 20 minutes before my friends arrived, Stan decided he needed to mow the lawn. Right outside the living room window where we were setting up. The noise was deafening. When Mom asked him to wait, he just shrugged and said, "The grass won't cut itself, Linda." My friends spent the entire party shouting over a lawnmower that didn't need to be running. That was Stan's way. He never said no directly. He just made sure things happened on his terms when he wanted them to happen. If it inconvenienced everyone else, well, that wasn't his problem. As I got older, the pattern became clearer. Stan had this way of making me feel like a guest in my own home. He'd rearrange furniture when I wasn't looking, so I'd walk into walls in the dark. He'd accidentally schedule important family discussions during my school events. He'd make jokes about how some kids just don't know when it's time to grow up, always with that smile that never reached his eyes. Mom defended him, of course. "He's just adjusting," she'd say. "It's hard for him too." But I noticed how she started asking permission for things she'd never needed permission for before. Could she buy groceries on Tuesday instead of Wednesday? Could she invite her sister over for dinner? Could she take me school shopping without checking with Stan first? By the time I graduated high school, I couldn't wait to leave for college. State school, 4 hours away, far enough to breathe but close enough to visit Mom. Those 4 years were the happiest I'd been in a decade. I had friends, professors who encouraged me, a boyfriend who actually listened when I talked. I studied communications with a focus on digital media, skills that would become more important than I ever imagined. But then Mom got sick. She called me during my final semester, crying so hard I could barely understand her. Breast cancer. Early stage, but she needed surgery, chemotherapy, months of recovery. Stan worked long hours and traveled for business. She needed help, and I was her only child. "I know you have your own life now," she sobbed into the phone, "but I don't have anyone else." I dropped everything. Deferred my internship, packed my car, and drove home the next day. It was supposed to be temporary, just until she was back on her feet. I moved back into my childhood bedroom, which Stan had converted into his home office. He grudgingly moved his desk into the basement, muttering about disruptions and impositions. I paid rent, $400 a month for a room that used to be mine. I bought groceries, cooked dinner, drove Mom to appointments, picked up prescriptions, and sat with her through the worst of the chemo side effects. Stan, he complained that the house was too crowded. "Some people," he'd say, loading his plate with the dinner I'd cooked, "don't know when they've overstayed their welcome." Mom would jump to my defense weekly, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She was fighting cancer and fighting to keep peace in her own home. I decided to make things easier for everyone. I'd smile, nod, and stay out of Stan's way. But I also started paying attention in ways I never had before. During one of Mom's better days, she was looking through old photo albums while I folded laundry. She pulled out a picture from my 10th birthday, the one with the lawnmower incident. "I can't believe he did that," she said softly. "What do you mean?" "The lawn. He'd mowed it that morning. I watched him do it while you were at school. He did it again during your party just too. She trailed off, then quickly closed the album. Never mind, I'm probably misremembering. But she wasn't misremembering, and I started wondering what else I'd missed over the years. That's when I decided to reach out to my biological father. I found Ray on social media. He'd remarried, had twin daughters, ran a small construction business. He looked happy. When I messaged him, he responded within an hour, and we talked for 3 hours on the phone that same night. I never stopped loving you, he said, his voice breaking. I couldn't fight anymore. What do you mean? That's when I learned the truth about my parents' divorce. Ray hadn't left us. He'd been pushed out. Your mother and I were having problems, he explained. Normal marriage stuff, money, stress, communication issues. We were seeing a counselor, trying to work things out. Then she started dating Stan while we were separated. I didn't like it, but I figured. People date during separations. But Stan convinced her I was unstable, that I'd never change, that she deserved better. The custody battle had been brutal. Stan hired expensive lawyers and painted Ray as an unfit father. Too many work trips, too much drinking, too irresponsible with money. None of it was true, but Ray couldn't afford to fight back. I was working 2 jobs just to pay child support, Ray said. I couldn't match their legal team, so I stepped back, hoping that maybe when you were older you'd want to know my side of the story. Why didn't you tell me this sooner? Because I didn't want to poison you against your mother. She was doing what she thought was best for you. And Stan, well, I hoped maybe I'd been wrong about him. But Ray hadn't been wrong about Stan, and during our conversations, he mentioned something that made my blood run cold. He reminds me of what I heard about his ex-wife, Ray said casually during one of our calls. His what? His ex-wife, the one before your mom. Didn't you know he was married before? I didn't know. Mom had never mentioned it. I'd assumed she was Stan's first wife, that he'd been a bachelor before meeting her. But Ray knew more. He'd heard rumors during the divorce proceedings, whispers about how Stan's first wife had disappeared suddenly, moved out of state, changed her name. I tried to find her once, Ray admitted. Thought maybe she could help with the custody case, but she was gone, like she'd never existed. That night, I stayed up until 3 in the morning researching Stan's background. Public records, social media, old newspaper clippings. It took weeks, but I finally found her. Jennifer Mason, now Jennifer Sanders, living in Portland, Oregon. She'd remarried, had 2 kids, worked as a graphic designer. Her social media was locked down tight, but I found a professional email through her design portfolio. I sent her a careful message. Explained who I was, why I was reaching out, promised I wasn't trying to cause trouble. I just wanted to understand the man my mother had married. She called me the next day. I wondered if someone would eventually contact me, she said. I've been waiting for this call for 8 years. Jennifer's story was eerily familiar. Stan had been charming, successful, seemingly perfect. But slowly, systematically, he'd isolated her from friends and family. He'd monitored her spending, criticized her appearance, made her feel like nothing she did was good enough. He doesn't hit you, she explained. He doesn't have to. He just makes you feel like you're crazy, like you're the problem. He's so good at it that you start believing him. The financial abuse had been subtle but devastating. He'd convinced her to add his name to her accounts for convenience. He'd taken out credit cards in her name for emergencies. He'd borrowed money from her retirement fund temporarily. By the time she realized what was happening, he'd drained her savings and destroyed her credit. I had to leave in the middle of the night, she said. I took one suitcase and drove to my sister's house in Portland. I was so scared he'd find me that I changed my name when I got married again. Did you ever think about pressing charges? With what proof? He was careful. Everything looked legitimate on paper. It was my word against his, and he had a reputation in the community. I just wanted to disappear and start over. But Jennifer had kept records. Bank statements, emails, screenshots of threatening messages. She'd never thrown them away just in case. If you ever need them, she said, let me know. I'd love to see that bastard finally face consequences. After talking to Jennifer, I started looking at Stan differently. I noticed things I'd missed before. How he always opened Mom's mail to help her. How he'd taken over managing their finances to reduce her stress. How he'd gradually convinced her to stop seeing friends who didn't understand their relationship. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of bank statements left on his desk. photos of credit card bills with charges I didn't recognize, voice recordings of phone calls I overheard from the kitchen while he talked in the living room. I had a friend from college, Maya, who worked as a paralegal. She'd always been good at spotting patterns, and she was the only person I trusted with what I was discovering. "This is financial abuse," Maya said when I showed her the evidence I'd collected. "Classic pattern, he's probably been doing this for years. What should I do?" "Keep documenting, get everything you can, and start thinking about an exit strategy for your mom." But I wasn't sure Mom would leave. She loved Stan, or thought she did. She'd built her life around him, adjusted everything to keep him happy. Even if I showed her the evidence, would she believe it? I was about to find out. Mom's health was improving, but the tension in the house was getting worse. Stan's complaints about my presence became more frequent and less subtle. "This was supposed to be temporary," he'd mutter while I cleaned the kitchen. "Some people don't know when they've worn out their welcome." I'd been there for 6 months. I was paying rent, buying groceries, doing most of the housework, and taking care of Mom's medical needs. But to Stan, I was an inconvenience. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in November. I was in my room, working on a freelance project, when I heard raised voices from downstairs. I crept to the top of the stairs to listen. "She's 23 years old, Linda. She should have her own place by now." "She's helping me recover," Mom said weakly. "The doctor said I need support for at least another few months." "You have me. You don't need her." "She's my daughter, Stan. She's a grown woman who's using your illness as an excuse to avoid taking responsibility for her own life." I felt my face burn with anger. Using her illness. I'd given up my internship, my apartment, my entire post-college life to take care of her. "That's not fair," Mom said. "She's been wonderful. I don't know what I would have done without her." "You would have been fine. You're stronger than you think, but you'll never find out as long as she's here treating you like an invalid." There was a long pause. Then Stan played his trump card. "I've been patient, Linda. More patient than most men would be. But this isn't the life I signed up for. I married you, not your adult daughter. If she's not gone by the end of the month, I'm filing for divorce." The ultimatum hung in the air like a threat. I held my breath, waiting for Mom to defend me, to tell him he was being unreasonable. Instead, I heard her crying. "Please don't say that," she whispered. "I can't lose you too. Then make a choice." I stood there in the hallway, my heart pounding, my world crumbling. Mom was going to choose him. I could hear it in her voice, in the way she'd gone quiet, defeated. That night I called Maya. "He gave her an ultimatum," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's him or me." "What did she say?" "She's going to choose him. I know she is." Maya was quiet for a moment. "What do you want to do?" "I want to destroy him." "Then let's do it. But we need to be smart about this. If you're leaving anyway, we need to make sure your mom has everything she needs to protect herself after you're gone." We spent the next 3 hours planning. I would continue gathering evidence, but more aggressively. I would also prepare a comprehensive package for Mom, everything she needed to understand what Stan had been doing and how to protect herself. "You can't force her to leave him," Maya warned. "But you can give her the tools to save herself when she's ready." The next morning, I started apartment hunting. I smiled at breakfast, told Mom and Stan that I'd been thinking about getting my own place, that I was excited about the next chapter of my life. Stan looked pleased. Mom looked devastated but tried to hide it. "I'll miss having you here," she said quietly. "I'll only be few minutes away," I promised. "And you're doing so much better. You don't need me anymore." Stan nodded approvingly. "It's good to see you taking initiative." If only he knew what kind of initiative I was actually taking. I spent the next 2 weeks working like a detective. I photographed every document I could find. I recorded conversations. I traced financial transactions. I contacted Jennifer again and got copies of her records from Stan's first marriage. The picture that emerged was devastating. Stan had been systematically draining Mom's accounts for years. He'd opened credit cards in her name, used her excellent credit to secure loans, and then hidden the debt. He'd convinced her to cash out her retirement early, claiming it was for investment opportunities that never materialized. But the financial abuse was just the beginning. I found text messages on his phone. He'd left it on the kitchen counter while showering, from someone named Jade. The messages were flirtatious, intimate, clearly indicating an ongoing affair. I screenshotted everything before he came back downstairs. Then I found something even worse. Stan had a second phone, an old iPhone he kept in his car. I found it while helping him carry groceries, buried under papers in his center console. When he went inside to use the bathroom, I quickly scrolled through it. The phone was full of conversations with what appeared to be financial advisors and lawyers. But the discussions weren't about legitimate investments or legal matters. They were about hiding assets, moving money offshore, and protecting wealth from potential future claims. Stan was preparing for something, and I had a sinking feeling I knew what it was. I forwarded the most damaging messages to my own phone, deleted the evidence that I'd accessed his, and put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. That evening, I called Jennifer again. "He's planning something," I told her. "I think he's going to divorce my mom and try to hide their assets so she can't claim them." "That's exactly what he did to me," Jennifer said. "By the time I realized what was happening, the money was gone. Offshore accounts, shell companies, fake business investments. I couldn't prove any of it." "What if we could prove it this time?" "What do you mean?" "I have documentation, bank records, text messages, email threads. If we work together, maybe we can finally stop him." Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. "I've been afraid of him for 8 years," she said finally. "But if you're brave enough to stand up to him, maybe it's time I was too." We spent the next week building a case. Jennifer provided her historical records, showing Stan's pattern of behavior across multiple relationships. I provided current evidence of his ongoing crimes. Maya helped us organize everything into a coherent timeline. The package we assembled was comprehensive and damning. Financial fraud, identity theft, adultery, emotional abuse, and evidence of planning to hide marital assets. Any divorce attorney would have a field day with this material. But I wasn't just planning to give it to a lawyer. I was planning to give it to Mom. On my last night in the house, I sat in my childhood bedroom and wrote her a letter. I told her everything I'd discovered, everything I'd learned about Stan's past, everything I feared about her future if she stayed with him. I told her I loved her, that I wasn't trying to hurt her, that I just wanted her to be safe and happy. And I told her that she had a choice. She could choose to see the truth, or she could choose to stay blind. But if she chose to stay with Stan after knowing what he really was, she was choosing to be destroyed. I sealed the letter in an envelope along with copies of all the evidence. I left it on her pillow, knowing she'd find it after I was gone. Moving day was a Saturday. I'd rented a small apartment across town, nothing fancy but clean and safe. Stan was unusually helpful, carrying boxes to my car with a smile that didn't hide his satisfaction. "This is exciting," he said as he loaded my desk lamp. "You're finally becoming independent." Mom was quiet, hovering in the doorway like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. I hugged her goodbye, whispered that I loved her, and told her to call me if she needed anything. "I'm proud of you," she said, but her voice was hollow. I drove to my new apartment, unpacked my essentials, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. Sunday morning, my phone rang at 6 a.m. It was Mom, crying so hard I could barely understand her. "I found your letter," she sobbed. "I read everything. I looked at the bank statements. I called the credit card companies. Gloria, what has he done to us?" "Where is he now?" "Golf course. He won't be back until this afternoon." "Can you come to my apartment? We need to talk in person." She arrived 20 minutes later, still in her pajamas, clutching the folder of evidence like a lifeline. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. "Is this all true?" she asked. "Every word." She sank onto my couch, staring at the documents spread across my coffee table. Bank statements showing systematic withdrawals, credit card bills with charges she'd never made, screenshots of text messages to his mistress, email threads about hiding assets. "I trusted him," she whispered. "I gave him everything." "You were manipulated," I said gently. "This isn't your fault." "How long have you known?" "I started suspecting things after I talked to Dad. The real investigation started about 2 months ago." She looked up sharply. "You talked to your father?" "Stan didn't tell you the whole truth about the divorce, Mom. Dad didn't abandon us. He was pushed out." I told her everything Ray had shared with me. How Stan had manipulated the custody battle, how he'd convinced her that Ray was unstable and unfit, how he'd isolated her from the only other person who might have protected her. "I've been so stupid," she said, burying her face in her hands. You weren't stupid. You were isolated and manipulated by someone who's very good at what he does, but now you know the truth. The question is, what are you going to do about it? We spent the next 3 hours going through the evidence piece by piece. I showed her how to access their joint accounts online, how to check their credit reports, how to document everything Stan had done. The financial picture was worse than I'd even realized. Stan had taken out a second mortgage on their house without telling her. He'd borrowed against her life insurance policy. He'd opened business credit cards using her social security number. "We're broke," she said, staring at the numbers. "Worse than broke. We're drowning in debt I didn't even know existed. Not if you act quickly." Maya gave me the name of a lawyer who specializes in cases like this. If you file for divorce first, you can freeze the accounts and stop him from hiding any more assets. "I don't know if I can do this." "Yes, you can. You're stronger than he's made you believe." She stayed at my apartment until Sunday evening, making phone calls and taking notes. We called the lawyer Maya had recommended, who agreed to meet with Mom first thing Monday morning. We called the banks to put alerts on all their accounts. We even called Jennifer, who offered to testify about Stan's pattern of behavior if needed. "I'm scared," Mom admitted as she prepared to go home. "That's normal. But you're not alone anymore. What if he suspects something? Act normal. Don't confront him yet. Let the lawyer handle the legal strategy." She hugged me goodbye, and for the first time in months, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in years. Determination. Monday morning, Mom met with the lawyer. By noon, she'd filed for divorce and obtained a temporary restraining order. By 3 p.m., Stan had been served at his office. He called me at 4 p.m., screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "What did you do?" he yelled. "What lies did you tell her?" "I didn't tell her anything that wasn't true. You poisoned her against me. You manipulated her." I showed her bank statements, Stan, her own bank statements. "Those are private financial matters between a husband and wife. Financial fraud is a crime, not a private matter. I'll destroy you for this. I'll make sure you never see your mother again. Good luck with that. You might want to focus on finding a good criminal defense attorney instead." He hung up, but he wasn't done. Over the next few days, he left dozens of voicemails, sent threatening texts, and even showed up at my apartment building. I documented everything and forwarded it to Mom's lawyer. The restraining order was made permanent within a week, but Stan had one more card to play. Thursday evening, he showed up at Mom's house despite the restraining order. A neighbor called the police, but before they arrived, he'd convinced Mom to let him inside. I got the call from Mom at 9 p.m. "He's here," she whispered. "He's crying, apologizing, saying he can explain everything. Get out of the house. Now, he says he made mistakes, but he loves me. He says we can work through this." "Mom, he's manipulating you. This is what he does. Maybe I was too hasty. Maybe we should try counseling." I felt my heart sink. Even with all the evidence, even knowing the truth, she was still vulnerable to his manipulation. "I'm coming over." "No, don't. We're talking. Really talking, for the first time in years." I hung up and called the police myself, reporting that a man was violating a restraining order. Then I drove to Mom's house, arriving just as the police cars pulled up. Through the living room window, I could see Stan on his knees, holding Mom's hands, talking earnestly while she cried. It was a perfect picture of remorse and reconciliation. But I knew it was all an act. The police knocked on the door and Stan's entire demeanor changed. He stood up, straightened his shirt, and opened the door with a confident smile. "Officers, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Sir, we have a report that you're violating a restraining order. My wife asked me to come over to discuss our marriage. She'll tell you." They looked at Mom, who was standing behind Stan, looking confused and conflicted. "Ma'am, did you invite him here?" Yes, but..." "She called me," Stan said smoothly. "We're trying to work things out." I got out of my car and walked toward the house. "That's not true," I said loudly. "He showed up uninvited. She called me scared." Stan turned to look at me, and for a moment his mask slipped. I saw pure hatred in his eyes. "Officer," he said, regaining his composure, "this is my stepdaughter. She's been trying to break up our marriage. She's the one who convinced my wife to file these false charges." "They're not false charges," I said, pulling out my phone. "I have recordings of him threatening me, text messages, voicemails. He's been harassing both of us since the restraining order was filed." I played one of his voicemails for the officers. His voice filled the night air. "I'll destroy you for this. I'll make sure you never see your mother again." The officers looked at each other, then at Stan. "Sir, you need to come with us. This is ridiculous. I'm being railroaded by a vindictive child. Sir, please turn around and put your hands behind your back." As they cuffed him, Stan looked directly at me. "You think you've won," he said quietly, "but you have no idea what you've started." I stepped closer to him, close enough that only he could hear me. "I know exactly what I've started," I said. "I'm finishing what you should have never begun." They put him in the back of the police car, and he was driven away into the night. Mom and I stood in the driveway, watching the taillights disappear. "I almost believed him," she said softly. "That's what he's counting on. That's what he's always counted on." "How did you know to call the police?" "Because I've been watching him for months. I know how he operates." She turned to look at me, and I saw something new in her expression. "Respect, you saved me," she said. "No, Mom, you saved yourself. I just gave you the tools." The next few months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, but everything went better than I'd dared to hope. Stan's arrest for violating the restraining order led to a deeper investigation of his finances. The evidence I'd gathered, combined with Jennifer's historical records, painted a clear picture of systematic fraud spanning multiple relationships and nearly a decade. He was charged with identity theft, wire fraud, and money laundering. The district attorney's office was particularly interested in his offshore accounts and shell companies, which suggested a level of sophistication that went beyond simple marital fraud. Mom's divorce attorney was able to freeze all their assets before Stan could move them. The house, the cars, the investment accounts, everything was locked down pending the outcome of both the criminal and civil cases. Jennifer flew in from Portland to testify in the criminal trial. Seeing her face stand in court after 8 years of hiding was one of the most powerful moments I've ever witnessed. "He made me feel like I was crazy," she told the prosecutor. "Like I was imagining things that were really happening. But I wasn't crazy. I was being systematically destroyed by someone who was very good at hiding what he was doing." Stan's defense attorney tried to paint him as a businessman who'd made some questionable decisions, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. He was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution to all his victims. Mom got the house, her retirement money back, and enough from the asset recovery to rebuild her financial security. More importantly, she got her confidence back. "I feel like I'm waking up from a long nightmare," she told me over dinner one evening. I'd forgotten what it felt like to make decisions without asking permission. She started seeing a therapist who specialized in recovering from emotional abuse. She reconnected with friends she'd lost touch with during her marriage to Stan. My relationship with my biological father, Ray, continued to grow stronger. He and Mom had several long conversations about the past, working through the pain and misunderstanding that Stan had created between them. They would never remarry, but they found a friendship and co-parenting relationship that should have existed all along. "I'm proud of you," Ray told me during one of our weekly phone calls. "You didn't just protect your mother. You broke a cycle that could have continued for years." "What do you mean? Men like Stan don't stop, they just find new victims." "By exposing him, by making sure he faced consequences, you probably saved other women from going through what your mother and Jennifer went through." I hadn't thought about it that way, but he was right. The investigation had uncovered evidence that Stan had been researching his next potential victim, a recently widowed woman in his golf club who had significant assets and adult children living out of state. As for me, I found an apartment I actually loved, got a job with a digital marketing firm, and started building the independent life I'd always wanted. But more than that, I found my voice. For years, I'd been the quiet one, the peacekeeper, the one who smiled and nodded to avoid conflict. But standing up to Stan taught me that sometimes conflict is necessary. Sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it's difficult and scary. Maya and I became even closer friends through the whole ordeal. She'd seen me at my most vulnerable and helped me find my strength. "You know what I'm proudest of," she said over drinks one evening. "What? You didn't just react, you planned, you gathered evidence, you built a case. You were strategic about protecting your mom instead of just getting revenge on Stan." She was right. I could have exposed Stan impulsively, emotionally, in a way that might have backfired. Instead, I'd been patient and methodical. I'd given Mom the tools she needed to save herself. 6 months after Stan's sentencing, I got a letter from him in prison. The return address made my stomach turn, but I opened it anyway. It was exactly what I'd expected. He blamed me for destroying his life, called me vindictive and manipulative, claimed that he'd really loved Mom and I'd poisoned her against him. But at the end of the letter, he wrote something that surprised me. "You're more like me than you want to admit. You're calculating, you're patient, you know how to get what you want. The only difference is that you think you're the hero of this story." I read that line several times, wondering if there was truth in it. Had I been manipulative? Had I been calculating? Then I looked at a photo on my desk, Mom and me at her birthday dinner the week before, both of us laughing, both of us free, and I had my answer. Yes, I had been calculating. I had been patient and strategic and methodical. But I'd used those skills to protect someone I loved, not to exploit them. I'd used them to expose the truth, not to hide it. There's a difference between manipulation and justice, between strategy and abuse, between protecting someone and controlling them. Stan never understood that difference, and that's why he was in prison while Mom and I were finally free. A year later, Mom called me with news that made me smile. "I got a call from the prosecutor's office," she said. "Stan's ex-wife from before Jennifer, the one who got the restraining order, she's coming forward. She wants to press charges for what he did to her too." How did they find her? She found them. She saw the news coverage of his trial and realized she could finally get justice. Stan's cycle of abuse had affected more women than we'd even known. But now, for the first time, his victims were finding each other, supporting each other, and making sure he faced consequences for all of his crimes. 3 weeks later, I had dinner with Dad at a restaurant downtown. He looked at me across the table and said something that brought tears to my eyes. "You know what's funny? When you were little, you used to say you wanted to be a detective when you grew up." "I did. You'd follow me around with a magnifying glass, looking for clues and evidence. You said you wanted to help people find the truth." I laughed. "I don't remember that." "I do, and watching you handle this situation with Stan, you did become a detective. You just did it to save your family instead of solving crimes for strangers." He was right. I had found the truth. I had gathered evidence. I had helped people, starting with the person who mattered most to me. That night, I called Mom before bed like I did every night now. "How was dinner with your dad?" she asked. "Good, really good." "How are you doing?" "Better every day. I signed up for that art class I mentioned." "That's wonderful." "Gloria, yeah. Thank you for everything, for being brave when I couldn't be, for seeing what I couldn't see, for saving us both." "You don't have to thank me, Mom. I love you." "I love you too. And I'm proud of the woman you've become." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment, looking around at the life I'd built for myself. It wasn't the life I'd planned when I graduated college, but it was better. It was honest. It was mine. Stan had tried to erase me from my own family, to make me feel like I didn't belong, like I was just an inconvenience to be managed and eventually discarded. But in the end, I wasn't the one who disappeared. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button. And don't forget to share this video and subscribe if you haven't already. We've got more incredible revenge stories coming your way.